Today we want to learn about how to divide fractions. And the good news is if you know how to multiply fractions, you'll be able to divide fractions. And you say, why? And I say, well, that's what you're going to learn today. But again, if you don't know how to multiply fractions, you'll never be able to divide fractions. And I'll tell you this, from the work that you've done for me on dividing fractions, the main problem you're having, okay, is that you're not simplifying, okay? And the best way to simplify is to simplify before you multiply. Because if you wait until after you multiply to simplify, you have too big a numerators and denominators, and you're going to make a mistake. So you need to know how to multiply to be able to divide fractions. But you need to know how to simplify before you multiply to be able to multiply fractions. So those are very important things for you to know before we start. Now, to talk to you about how to divide fractions, I'm going to show you the mathematical reasoning that went behind the people who developed it. Now, you don't really need to know this. You'll never be tested on this. But I'm going to show it to you anyway, because instead of just telling you what they do, I think it's more important for you to understand why you do it. To understand that someone didn't just sit in a room and say, hey, let's do this to divide. It has to be mathematically correct. All right, so you are in 5th grade right now. You most probably won't be able to follow what I'm going to show you. Although I've been surprised, some people follow everything I show them. Great. But you know what? If you're in 6th grade, I showed it to you in 5th grade, and now if you're in 6th grade, you might understand it when you didn't in 5th grade. And if you're in 7th grade, I showed it to you in 5th and 6th grade, so by 7th grade, maybe you understand it completely. All right? Hopefully, you can understand it. But the truth is, you don't even need to understand it. I just want to show it to show you what mathematicians did to figure out how to divide fractions. Because you might say to me, Mr. Dew, why didn't they just do numerator divided by numerator, denominator divided by denominator? Because when you multiply fractions, it's numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. And you know what? That works. If I had something like 10 27ths divided by 2/3. If I do numerator divided by numerator, 10 divided by 2, I get 5. If I do denominator divided by denominator, 27 divided by 3 is 9. And the honest truth is, that's my answer. And you go, cool, so that's all I need to do. No, because this way of dividing fractions only works 1 out of every 10 times, or maybe even 1 out of every 20 times. What good is there to use something that doesn't work all the time? And you go, I don't get it. Why won't it work all the time? Because if I had something like this, 3/4 divided by 2/3, I can't do that way, because 3 divided by 2, 2 doesn't go into 3 evenly. And 4 divided by 3 doesn't go into 4 evenly. So the only way that this way would work is if this numerator goes into this numerator evenly, and this denominator goes into this denominator evenly. And that does not happen but out of 1 out of every 10 to 20 times. So we needed to come up with another way to do it. By the way, if I wanted another way to do it, here's what mathematicians did. If I wanted to do 3/4 divided by 2/3, the first thing mathematicians did is they wrote 3/4 divided by 2/3 like that. And you might go, oh my God, why would they write it like this instead of that? By the way, I hope you understand that this means the same thing as that, because doesn't one of the meanings of fraction mean to divide? And isn't the number you divide by on the bottom, so it's in the back? So this says 3/4 divided by 2/3. This says 3/4 divided by 2/3. And again, if you don't understand that, don't panic. But that's exactly what this says is exactly what this says. So the next thing mathematicians do is they say, how could I somehow or another change this into a fraction, or into just get rid of the bottom actually? How could I make it just 1 fraction instead of 2 fractions? And again, basically what you're saying is, how could you divide by something so that the answer would come out to be the same thing that's on the top. And by the way, what can you divide something by so it equals itself? If you think about that for a minute, if you divide by 1, you get the same answer you had to begin before you divide. So what I want to do is I want to change this into 1 whole. And you go, well, how could you change 2/3 into 1 whole? Well, think about what we learned the other day in the video. A reciprocal. What's a reciprocal? The number you multiply a number by to get an answer of 1. So if I want to change 2/3 into 1 whole, which then I'd be dividing by 1 and I wouldn't even have to divide, I want to multiply it times its reciprocal, which is 3/2. Remember, reciprocal means to flip it around. And by the way, if I multiply the bottom by 3/2 and I want it to stay equal to the same number, equivalent fractions, remember that? To get equivalent fractions, you multiply the numerator and denominator both by the same thing. So if I want it to stay equal to what this is, I need to multiply the top and the bottom both by 3/2. By the way, I know that I might be going a little too fast for you right now in the video. If we were in the classroom, I could judge by the way you looked if you were understanding what I was saying or not. But just take my word for it. If I multiply the top and the bottom both by the same thing, I get an equivalent fraction. By the way, if I multiply the top and the bottom both by the same thing, the top comes out to be 3/4 times 3/2, because that's numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, and the bottom comes out to be 1. Because 2/3 times 3/2, a number times its reciprocal equals 1. That's what a reciprocal is. That's why we learned reciprocals. So we could change this bottom to 1. By the way, anything divided by 1 equals itself. So this just equals 3/4 times 3/2, which by the way, now I can multiply. 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 2 is 8, and 9/8 is improper. Divide 8 into 9 goes once, remainder 1/8. All right, and again, that's my answer, 1 1/8, because it's proper and simplified. And you look at this and you go, oh my God, Mr. Du, you want me to do all of this work every time? No. This is what mathematicians did to figure it out. If you can understand the step-by-step reasoning, then that's great. But the honest truth is, all you need to know is you have to start with this and end and change it to this. In other words, I have to change 3/4 divided by 2/3 into 3/4 times 3/2. And again, this is 3/4 divided by 2/3 became 3/4 times 3/2. By the way, a little girl about 8 or 9 years ago, time flies so fast, her name was Kate Lorio, came up with a rhyme to remember this. And I like that rhyme because it helps people remember what you do. And the rhyme goes like this: bring down, flip around, multiply, after you simplify. All right, so you bring down the front, you flip the back to its reciprocal, and then you change it to multiplication. But don't multiply until you simplify. So bring down, flip around, multiply after you simplify. So if you want to know the official rule to divide fractions, here it is. Change the division problem into a multiplication problem by changing the number you divide by to its reciprocal. By the way, remember what I said in the last video? The only time you ever use reciprocals is in division, and the only number you ever change the reciprocal is the one you divide by. This is the reason why. Because to change division problem into a multiplication problem, you change the number you divide by to its reciprocal. So the only time you're ever going to use reciprocals is in division. And why are you going to use reciprocals in division? So you can change it to multiplication. And how do you change it to multiplication? You change the number you divide by to its reciprocal. And again, Kate Lorio's rhyme says the same thing in a short little rhyme. Bring down, flip around, multiply after you simplify. So, if I go back to that original problem that I gave you, which was 10/27 divided by 2/3, we found out that that answer was 5/9. And we did that by numerator divided by numerator, denominator divided by denominator. And again, that would be great if we could use that all the time, but that only works like 1 out of every 10 to 20 times. Not good. But let's see if I can still get 5/9 by following this rule. Let's see if what mathematicians said really does work. So to do this, I have to change the division problem and multiplication problem. And to use Kate's rhyme, I have to bring down the front. And I have to change the back, flip it around to its reciprocal. Bring down, flip around. Then multiply. But wait, don't multiply until you simplify. Can I simplify before I multiply? Any top with any bottom? I can. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 7 9 times. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 1 is 5. 9 times 1 is 9. What do you know? Mathematicians actually know what they're talking about. You can do this by changing the division problem to a multiplication problem by changing the number you divide by to its reciprocal. All right, by the way, a couple of words of warning. Number one, some people get it wrong because they change it to multiplication, but they don't change this to a reciprocal. They bring down, but they don't flip around. And even worse is some people change the number you divide into to its reciprocal and not change the number you divide by to reciprocal. Remember, you change the number you divide by to its reciprocal, and the number you divide by is in the back. And even worse, some people change both of them to reciprocal. They just go crazy. All right, remember Kate Lorio's rhyme. Bring down the front, flip around the back, then make it multiplication. But don't multiply until you simplify. All right, so that's how you divide fractions. And again, when I showed you the proof in the beginning, that was just so you would understand that there was really a reason behind what you're doing. The bottom line is all you need to know is change the division problem to a multiplication problem by changing the number you divide by to its reciprocal. Or, in Kate Lorio's rhyme, bring down, flip around, multiply after you simplify. And that's what you need to know to divide fractions.